All right, looks like we got people logging in. Welcome, welcome. All right, everyone. Oh, we got one more person. Good. I know there was some other stuff going on today, so I do appreciate everyone joining us today. We're going to be doing Link to Literacy. This is sort of the part 2 part of it, and I took the liberty of asking someone else to join us from our organization with tons of experience in the classroom, Mr. Joe Ibarra. And he's going to be doing a lesson delivery. Of course, at this time, everyone has their portal. I'm jumping in the Link to Literacy. And I know a lot of your team members are week 2. And because of the survey, I was able to see you guys are going to be starting week 3 here, week 3. Week 3 is pretty exciting because we have our first instances of periodic review and we have a quiz. And I'm going to show you these. I'm going to show you these both in just a few moments here. And then of course we have our flashcards. So I'll stop everything and show you our flashcards just one more time. Now, flashcards are just a wonderful resource that's built into Link to Literacy. And these flashcards are great because you can use them in 2 different ways, okay? The first way is teacher-driven. The second way is student-driven. By just grabbing the link, you're able to send these directly to your students for them to work independently, or you can use these as your daily flashcards in your classroom, your virtual classroom. Next, you'll see that it also calls for periodic review 1. So here's the example of the lesson I went to. And by using this little hamburger symbol, I'm able to go to PR1. PR1, we have the instructions here on the right-hand side. I think this one's kind of cool. It is an ALPAC style question.
We are surrounded by many plants. One example is ferns, which are flowerless. They are easy to recognize by the feather-like shape of their leaves.
You'll see that most of our PR1s will have a listening component, and you've no doubt have seen that we already have the writing component to it. Okay, this handout right here, you can see the little circles here. These handouts are writable PDFs. And then here we also have quizzes. We're also going to have a quiz this week. All right, for your Google Classroom, it's pretty easy. You know, really what Google Classroom is just a platform to copy links. So what I did here is I went ahead and assigned my quiz by copying the link over. We also had writable PDFs here. And when you're doing assignments, just make sure you go ahead and hit make a copy for each. And I'm checking Alex's work of the assignment he turned in already. And I will be quiet now as Joe takes over.
Okay, good morning, everyone. How's everyone doing out there? So one quick question to everyone. About how many students do you have learning remotely during a lesson delivery on average? About 10?
15.
About 15. Okay, great. So I know what strategies to focus on. I know you use Google Classroom, but you'll probably hear me refer to, accidentally say Zoom. Zoom has become the new most commonly used term. Speaking of Zoom and how it's already affecting our society in tremendous ways, we'll start with a quick question. What retail items have dramatically plummeted in sales? And there's a hint, due to Zoom. What do you think? We'll start with that. Go ahead and answer in this chat room. What retail items have just dramatically plummeted? Dan, you're pretty close there. Dress pants, nice shoes, high heels, it's plummeted. I mean, it's actually an issue. And what do you think has skyrocketed and gone up in sales? Sweatpants, collared shirts, nice tops, lighting. That's funny. I have a desk in the corner, and every time I do this, I have to, even my lights, I have to work on that. We did a, remote presentation. How far away from the camera should I stand? In fact, the new, I just read an article, or I was sent an article last week. What's going down? Backpack sales. And what's going up? Personal desks. So that's how, we're making some changes. So remote teaching, obviously, as you know, a very challenging time for us as educators. And, to learn remotely, first we'll start with Confucius, a picture of Confucius? You know, my son, who's 7 years old, has ADHD. He was just diagnosed with ADHD. And I learned because of that, even though I've always known that I have ADHD, I literally do have ADHD. I know everyone's overdiagnosed. You know, everyone has a form of ADHD or some of the attributes of it. And I mention this because it's extremely hard for me to focus on remote, you know, Google Classroom or Zoom meetings all day. I'm very easily distracted even when I want to. And that's what our kids are struggling with at home. You know, there's so many distractions at home. You have your cell phone, your coffee, your other things going on. So how do we keep their focus, especially when it comes to retaining information? I know you have the Launch and Link to Literacy program, and those are our lessons. But those lessons, another thing with my son, you know, he's learning remotely. He gets homework packages weekly, and 90% of it is really busy work. You know, it's busy work that he should be doing independently. And the problem is there's no academic growth if a student is doing work independently. They need to be taught for there to be growth. And the thing that you need to keep in mind is that if you are assigning your students work, you have to make sure that they can do it successfully, because it's almost detrimental if a student attempts to do work and if they do it incorrectly. If they do it incorrectly, they will fossilize it incorrectly. It takes about 17 to 24 repetitions or rehearsals to learn something. It takes over 70 to unlearn something. So our lessons are not meant to just be assigned to our students for them to do independently. The first initial teaching is for us to show the students how to do the concept or understand the concept and how to do the skill required so they can do it, reinforce it independently. You know, here's a good example of learning something incorrectly and fossilizing. To this day, I cannot spell receive. You know, I do, if I'm writing very slow, I before E, except after C, I go through that, which works for receive. But if I'm typing quickly, I will always misspell receive because I fossilized it incorrectly. So we have to ensure that our students, if we are going to give them work, especially if we want them to learn something new, that they can do it correctly. And hopefully today we'll show you some strategies of how we do that. Okay, and so going back to Zoom, how do we keep our students engaged and ensuring that they're understanding that? Well, we've used our engagement norms and we've adapted them. And the key is constantly checking for understanding with your students, seeing if they understand, checking for understanding with their whiteboards, randomly selecting with popsicle sticks and asking them to read answers so they have accountability, so they're ready. They have to participate. And you know, you start, especially with high school students, is when we go over the engagement, you give them metacognition. This is why we're doing it. This is why it's so important that you do this and that work with us. And it's that relationship building that will get them, you can get them to buy into what you're trying to do with them. So that being said, I do these same strategies with my teachers when I'm training them. You know, I really am very thankful that everyone has their video on. Half the time, sometimes people don't have their video on, but that's really important because I want to see your engagement. I'm going to teach you gestures today and things like that. And I am going to ask you questions to answer. The one thing about Google Meeting, and like I said, you're going to hear me call it Zoom. It's the same thing with a couple different applications, is if you unmute everyone at the same time, there's a 1 second delay. So you can't really unmute everyone, but you can call on them. But I tell my students very clearly, I need you reading this at home out loud. I want to see your mouth reading this. Read this out loud. The way you learn a language, especially if you're an EL, is by reading it and reading out loud. Even all our English language learner strategies are based off of very sound teaching strategies to any learner. We just, for ELs, we have a lot of focus on language acquisition, pronunciation, on reading fluency, and on comprehension, and on vocabulary development. And every learner should have that. All right, so first, everyone read this at home out loud with me. 1, 2, 3. I hear and I forget. I see and I remember. I do and I understand. Confucius. Okay, this is very important. Confucius already understood how we retain information. Okay, a very small percentage of us their main modality of learning is auditory learners. Maybe they say 16 to 20%. So basically, if you're talking the whole time, it's literally going in one ear, out the other, okay? To retain information, the person who is doing is the person who's learning. The person who's talking is the person retaining information. So we must have our students doing something at home. That's why we do have our gestures. That's why we do have our read with me. I know as a teacher, I focus a lot on K through 12. Kindergarten, I just got the chills thinking about kindergartners and doing these strategies. But even high school students, I'm very conscious. Look, the engagement norms, we do this to retain information. A big misconception I see in high schools is that students should learn in lecture-based learning form. Well, that's how I learned in college. It was lecture-based. Well, if you really think about it, college students who are going to college are usually very highly motivated, number one. And the reality is you didn't learn during the lecture. The lecture just told you what to learn when you went home to learn it. You just took copious notes on, okay, I better know about this concept, this concept, this concept, this concept. Then you went home if you were very motivated. I know I was, because I had to pay for my college, and I would study. Okay, I need to learn about this. How do I do it? I'll learn it myself. I'll go to study groups. I'll go to TA hours. And that's how I learned, is by actually doing it. So we want to make sure we understand that when we're teaching our students. How can we get them engaged? So here are some of the strategies we have been developing. These are our engagement norms. But first, we develop remote learning norms. And like I said, we give our students a metacognition. Why we do this. The first one, and like I said, I want you reading at home. I know we're adults, and even our high school students, I know, but even our students who are learning to read, if there's new language that they're not new terms, the National Council on Reading clearly states the way you learn to read is by reading out loud. So we have to say, okay, this is how you're going to learn. I know you can read it in your head, but reading it out loud at home by yourself will really help you. All right, so number one, the first engagement remote learning norm that we have, video camera on. Prepare for remote learning. I'll never ask teachers to purchase anything. I understand our strict budgets. I was a teacher for over 8 years, so I understood how difficult it was to buy the things I needed sometimes. But I do know something that has changed my presentations remotely. I got a second screen. And like I said, I won't ask you to buy one, but I literally took my desktop screen, because I used my laptop to present because it had the best camera and it had the best microphone. So I used it, but I had to keep moving my lessons that I had on. So I needed a second screen. I took my desktop screen, moved it over, and luckily it had an HDMI input output, and I plugged that into my laptop. Now I have two screens. So I have all my students. If you see me looking this way, it's because I'm looking at all my students. I have all their squares so I can see who's engaged and who's tracking. And then I have my lesson that I see my students focusing on. So that video camera on, and that ensures their accountability. Enter name for screen share. We'd like their name here. Sound muted, again, there's a second delay. We need them corally reading with us, but they're gonna be reading at home, because if I had you all unmuted, especially over 10, it would be, there's too much feedback, it throws everything off. Eyes on screen to minimize distraction, that's what we're doing. We participate in a lesson with the reading out loud, with the gesturing, with the answering questions, with showing me whiteboards, with checking for understanding. The whiteboard paper ready to show answers. We have whiteboards, and they can even use little post-it notes. Unmute when answering, so your students need to be prepared. I will be calling you consistently, so be ready to unmute when called upon, and use chat as needed. One thing with chat, I like it, but some students get writer's block. Some like to type, some can't type. So I like to ask a couple students orally first by randomly selecting. When I go to this, it's because I have pop sticks in my classroom with the students' names on them. You can have that at home with their names, so you know they're being randomly selected. Any type of randomizer will work. So here are some of the remote learning norms that we have, and we can't pair share, so we have think time. We'll go over that in our engagement norms. Which remote learning strategy can you explain why it would be important for students' participation? You can just choose one and say the reason why it would be important. For example, I would say, I'd like my students to enter names. Number one, so I can call them very quickly because I have 5 different classes I teach, and that's why I appreciate strategy. So think of another strategy that you see here, and why is that important for your students to use this strategy to engage them when they're learning remotely?
I like the sound muted because there's often a lot of background noise in the households.
There's background noise, and if everyone corally reads at the same time, the feedback and the delay doesn't work. That's the problem. But they have to know how to unmute and mute very quickly when I do answer, like you just did, Nina. Okay? Anyone else want to try that? Give an answer?
For me, it's important that they participate in the lesson, as in answering questions as often as possible, checking for understanding either in the chat, usually not orally, either in the chat or via Edpuzzle, etc., making sure that they're following.
Thumbs up, thumbs down. And yes, when I say orally, it's like, look, I mean, I'm going to randomly select someone to answer a question here, because if you've done chat, some students can really give your answer very quickly. Some won't answer. They'll just be the passive learning because there's no accountability. So that's something you have to make a decision. Dan, we talked about this. Yes, no. I'm going to go over it in whiteboards. When I just quickly go over the engagement norms, I'm very clear with my students. Whiteboards are for me. They're for me as your teacher. I need to understand your understanding of the concept, whether I need to give another example, whether I need to teach the whole class, whether you can maybe correct your own thinking. I'll never call on the incorrect answer first. It's okay to be incorrect. I'm not grading you at the moment. This is giving me information. So what I mean by that is sometimes when you do this, you see the students doing, no, it has to be very firm because like I said, you're giving me information.
I was talking about the blue thumbs on Zoom. Like you can do that. Yeah, when I have the share, the thumbs or the clap up symbol, I do clap for no, thumbs up for yes. I like the ones in the participants tab because they stay there. And so like the biggest problem I have is I can't see their screen and I don't know if they're on the same thing as me. And so I've been using those to be like, do you see this on your screen? And obviously some kids put the thumb up because they see my shared screen.
Right.
And that's
one of those.
Know that that's not their screen, but like we're working on that.
That's one of those where they can be on their Facebook page or reading the news, and that's a reality. That's why I'm always checking for understanding. Here are the engagement norms.
Right, and I know, Joe, you said you're going to go through this fast. I just want to make you conscious of time. Before we begin the engagement norms, Joe, Alex Chavez, and I were on a webinar. Ultimately, Alex stopped the meeting and made an observation. The reason parents are getting really upset is because they're behind the door, they're on the side of their kid, and they're watching their kid watch a real-time video happen, and the kids are sitting for 20 minutes without talking. And so Alex reinforced and said, hey, this is what we're going to be doing, guys. This is engagement norms. The parents want to hear their kids do something, talk something, do gestures, whatever it takes. They want to see something beyond another YouTube video, another video. Sorry, I had to just point that out, Joe. Thank you so much. Keep going.
Okay, so our engagement norms very quickly. This is almost a review. This isn't a review, but do it with me. Number 1, 2, 3, read with me. Pronounce with me. We pick one word or two or a couple words together that is a high leverage, high usage word throughout our lesson. It's not a supplementary word that you'll see in your reading. It's usually a concept word or a high usage academic vocabulary word, and the first 3 are all to promote reading fluency. For example, if I was teaching this poster to my students, I might pre-pronounce this word right here. Engagement. Class, listen while I read this. And in fact, I know for my elementary kids, I have them pointing with me. That's might be a little too much for high school students, but it's like, I need you following. You need to follow with your eyes what I read so you can properly pronounce who you are. Engagement. Your turn, class. Engagement, student engagement. Read that, student engagement. That's how we pronounce that. Track with me, read with me is when I read a sentence first. Not every sentence in my lesson. You're going to see all these in a lesson in a second. It's usually a learning objective or a concept definition. Gesture with me. You know, it's a kinesthetic activity. Some of the feedback I get from high school teachers is, you know, our students are too old for gestures. You know, we don't use this. Well, gestures are actually really important kinesthetic activity. I'm not asking, I won't recommend you do very animated gestures that a, like a first, second grade or third grade teacher might use, but very simple gestures for your learners to remember things. And you explain, this is kinesthetic. It's a multiple pathway to the brain. For example, let's try this at home. We're going to learn about context clues. I want all the teachers doing this at home. You're going to be my 6th, 7th, and 8th grade students when I'm doing level D. Context clues. I have an unknown word, and everyone do this. When I see my students doing the gesture at home, I know they're following me. Context clues are the nearby words. See how they're nearby that unknown word to help determine the meaning of the unknown word. That's how I remember what context clues are. Okay. Pair share. Obviously, we don't have that luxury remotely, so we give them think time. We can't cold call. There are some things we need for fluency. Those are rote learning, timetables, high frequency words, things like that. But thinking questions, especially higher order questions, you need think time to process the information. So we give them think time. And ELs even need more think time because they hear the question in English, they translate it into their native language, and then they retranslate the answer into English. It takes more think time. Attention signal, give me a thumbs up when we're ready to move on. Whiteboards, I mentioned this, whiteboards are for me as the teacher. I explain to them short answers so we can move quickly. You can use the thumbs up for yes or the clap for no, however you want to do it. And complete sentences, public voice, academic vocabulary. Look, this is one of the easiest engagement norms to implement, and it has such high impact on students as far as what as a teacher do we expect our students to write in? Complete sentences. So language acquisition, first you hear, so you hear new vocabulary, new words, then you speak, then you read, and then you write. Speaking translates into writing. Okay, so I'm always having my students use complete sentences, most importantly with the academic vocabulary that I'm using today. Determine the meaning of words using context clues. Determine is a very important word I want to hear in their answers. Context clues. And the way you support your students with complete sentences is by the question you ask them. You model a complete sentence in your question so they are set up for the answer. For example, I'll never ask, what's the answer? Who knows? What? No. Which one is an example of context clues? How do you know? So my students can answer. The example of context clues is an A, because. Okay, so modeling the answer, the academic vocabulary you want them to use in their answers is done by modeling it in the question you ask them. Those are engagement norms. I want to get to the lesson because I want to show some more teaching than anything, but does anyone have any questions on the engagement norms or how to use them? We're ready to go to the lesson? Thumbs up? Yep. Okay. One of the biggest misconceptions I see is that people feel that it is for underperforming students and it's very low level. That's if you're doing a misapplication. And usually in the beginning, especially if you're not familiar with our strategies, it's very mechanical, explicit direct instruction, EDF. You understand our engagement norms, you use them, but the key to our delivery is in higher order questioning. And that's a whole nother level. But anyway, we based our higher order questioning on Bloom's taxonomy. Remember, recalling facts and basic concepts, that's a very low level on Bloom's taxonomy. So if we ask our students to just read the definition to us or tell me what that definition is, that's usually just recall. We want to understand, explain ideas. That's where we're starting to get it. Apply, we use information in new situations. Analyze, we draw connections among ideas. We compare and contrast. We evaluate, justify our stance. So we're always justifying our decisions. These are the top 4 is what we're always shooting for in our students' response. Create, can you give me an example of the concept I'm teaching? And today we're going to be doing context clues. So I say that because one thing you should have an understanding of is our higher order questions. You're going to see this throughout the lesson today. Which, and it's going to be on context clues. Which is an example of context clues? How do you know? Okay. Why is sentence A an example of context clues? Explain. Why is sentence B not an example of context clues? How do the example and non-example differ? Give me an example of a context clue. Create a sentence that uses context clues. Okay. So in your own words, what is context clues? We ask this in your own words last, because in the beginning, they're usually just repeating the definition. So we want them to really understand that. In skill development guided practice, how did I accomplish this step? How did you interpret this step? And how did you know what the answer means? So that's the higher order questions, and that's when you're truly implementing our strategies correctly. So let me show you what a lesson looks like. All right, first of all, keep in mind, our lessons are not a script. They're not scripted. They're actually a skeleton. We believe in exposing our students to a lot of academic language and examples, and you're going to see, but we don't know what examples you might have at your disposal, so use any examples you want. So anyway, let's start with our lesson. Let's look at this word right here. We're going to pre-pronounce it. Context clues. Pronounce it at home. Context clues. That's how you pronounce that word. Let me read the learning objective today. Track with me at home. We will determine the meaning of words using context clues. Everyone read that for me. We will determine the meaning of words using context clues. Let me see who can read that for me. Amira, can you read the learning objective for me?
We will determine the meaning of words using context clues.
Nicely read. Dan, can you read the learning objective for me?
We will determine the meaning of words using context clues.
Very nicely read. Now, keep in mind, this is a little scripted. The reason is teacher read once. Students tracked with me and read with me twice. Amira read, Dan read. In 30 seconds or 45 seconds, I can practice rehearsing the academic and content language I'll be reading throughout my lesson very quickly, okay? But I don't track with me, read with me, everything. Now, activating prior knowledge, we're not assessing. We're just getting them that they know something about this. We're making a connection to their prior knowledge. Let's look at this picture. Where are they? Where do you think the people in this picture are? Most importantly, how do you know? Okay, go ahead, think time. Be ready to answer. I'll be calling on someone. Patty, where do you think these people are? More importantly, how do you know?
Hi there. I believe the people are in a school, inside a classroom.
And what makes you think that?
The poster in the background.
The poster in the background that looks like a poster board for teachers. Very well. Yeah, they're in a classroom. What they're in a classroom. What type of classroom do you think there are? Does anyone have any ideas? And more importantly, how would you know what type of classroom they are? Jennifer, can you tell me what type of classroom you think they're in and why?
I think they are possibly in like a computer lab.
Mm-hmm. And why would you think that?
Because I see the word computer and URL, and I actually see like the keyboard.
Right, and if you see here, computer, keyboard. So class, you're already using clues and pictures to get information of where these people are at. When you use clues in text, something you read, we call those context clues to understand the meaning of unknown words. You do this all the time. We're going to focus on context clues in text. So very quickly, learning objective, activating prior knowledge. There is no teaching there. It's just, quickly practicing rehearsal and connecting to their prior knowledge. In concept development and skill development guided practice, that's where the teaching occurs. Here's how a teacher does concept development. Do this at home. This is a teacher gesture. I'm doing an academic definition. Do this gesture with me. An academic definition, multiple examples, possible non-examples, and then a higher order question. I'm always doing this pattern. I never read a lesson from top to bottom. Okay, I do one. This is an easy lesson because there's only one definition. You usually have a definition and attributes. I don't read all the definitions. I don't go to the example. I do one line at a time, example. One line at a time, example. The reason being, if this is a new concept for a student, you can get them to memorize a definition. That is not understanding of the concept. You understand a concept when you can see a definition of a concept, like context clues, understand multiple examples of it, create your own examples, and understand why non-examples are not that concept. That's where we're trying to get to them. And I'll show you a way we differentiate as well with our question. All right, track with me, read with me. My turn, class. Context clues can be nearby words or pictures that help determine the meaning of words. Read with me. Context clues can be nearby words or pictures that help determine the meaning of words. That's my academic definition. Now I have to have them contextualized with an example. You know what? Here's a kinesthetic, here's a cognitive strategy, class. Here's a gesture. I have an unknown word. Do this at home. I have an unknown word. Context clues are the nearby words to help determine the meaning of the unknown word. Now I've got a way to remember that. Very simple gesture for older students, by the way. Don't get too animated. Very simple, you know, balanced equation, inverse operation, simple gestures for high school students. Now I give them an actual example. Look, let's pretend we don't know what exhausted means. Exhausted is my unknown word. Context clues are the nearby words, nearby exhausted, to help determine what exhausted means. This is what this means. Let's all read this together. Remember, there's an exclamation mark. Marcos had been running hard in soccer practice. He was exhausted. If I don't know what exhausted means, I can use nearby words. Marcos had been, they're nearby words, but that doesn't tell me anything. Marcos had been hungry. Marcos had been sleepy. Marcos had been hot. No, that doesn't tell me that. Running hard. Wait a second. If I'm running hard in soccer practice, when I played soccer and I ran hard, I get very, very tired. Exhausted means tired. Running hard on my context clues, they're nearby, and they let me know exhausted means tired. Okay, I've given an academic definition. An example and a non-example. My non-example was Marcos had been. Okay, running hard is the actual example. Now here's the differentiation strategy, how I can differentiate to a high, middle, and low performing student in one question. Which words in the sentence are context clues that help determine achievement means success? Explain. He celebrated his greatest achievement with all his friends. Let's pretend we don't know what achievement means. What are the nearby words or context clues that will help me? Is it with all his friends, or is it B, he celebrated his greatest? Okay, so I'm gonna just set up a scenario in our classroom. Let's pretend, Nina, you're my low performing student. You have a misconception, which is okay. You put A. Amira, you're my middle performing student. You understand it's B. Those are context clues, because when you celebrate something great, that's something really good to do. And so achievement must be something really good to do. And Jennifer, you're a high performing student who I have to keep challenged. Okay. In EDI, our questions is to the highest performing students in our class. We differentiate at the response. So Jennifer, I know you have B, but more importantly, I want you to tell me why it's not A. Okay, that's error analysis, even a higher order level of thinking. And you know it's not A because with all his friends doesn't give you enough information to understand anything about achievement. And remember, one of the most valuable things that we do in our delivery, we're constantly checking for real-time assessments with whiteboards and with random selection, because it's called formative assessment. Here, we want to understand, more importantly, why a student is incorrect. Okay, because if we understand why he's incorrect, we can clarify the misconception. For example, I've taught this many times. Sometimes one of the responses with all his friends that I've gotten from students is, you know, to have a lot of friends is a great thing to do. Achievement must be great because he has a lot of friends. That's a very understandable misconception. Sometimes a student just might be unclear because he doesn't understand the concept. So let's model a scenario in a classroom. Nina has A, Amira B, middle performing, Jennifer B, high performing. I never call on my incorrect answer first. I also don't call on my highest performing students first. I'm trying to gauge my class's understanding. So I start with middle performing students. I'm echoing Amira's answer to teach Nina. I'm echoing Jennifer's answer to teach Nina, and hopefully she can clear her misconception and she can say, oh, I see where I made my mistake. Her clearing her misconception is much more valuable. So I go, Amira, I saw that you put B. Why is that an example of a context clue? How do you know? When you answer, please say it's an example of a context clue because.
It's an example context clue because celebrate his greatest show's achievement because you're celebrating something really big.
Something, when you celebrate greatest, that's an example. And I'm just, what I'm always doing is I'm echoing or elaborating on my student's answer because for Nina's sake, okay? When you celebrate something great, that's something you've done really, really well. Like if you celebrate an A+ on your test, that must be something you did successfully. Achievement must mean success. Jennifer, I also see that she put B as an example of context clues. Why is A not an example of using context clues? It is not an example of context clues because
it is not an example. A is not an example of context clues because we do many things with all our friends. Like we can celebrate with all our friends, but we can go to a funeral with all our friends and mourn something and be sad about it.
It's not that much information. I could be playing soccer with all my friends. I could be doing something sad like a funeral with all my friends. I could, you know, I'm looking for information about achievement. Yes, very nicely done. Nina, would you like to change your answer and would you tell me why?
I would change my answer to B because to achieve something is closely related to celebrating something.
Something, not only celebrating, something great that you did. So this is concept development. Conceptual understanding of the concept is very important for deep understanding. And now we're going to do the skill. Okay, in the skill, do this skill development teacher does. Model the first one, guided practice the students do. And do one step at a time. It looks something like this. Read the sentence looking carefully at the bolded word. And I'm going to go a little quicker in my pace because I only have a few minutes. Clever. That's my bolded word. Everyone, what's the bolded word? Clever. Let's all read this together. We're going to identify the context clues that help determine the meaning. John is good at solving math problems because he is clever. All right. If I don't know, let's pretend I don't know what clever means. This lesson is not about knowing my answer, A, B, or C. This lesson is about finding the context clues. We're going to cite textual evidence in our answer. So clever, how do I know what clever means? Look, first I look at it, John is good. Well, that doesn't really tell me what clever means. Is he good at snoring? Is he good at eating? Is he good at basketball? No. Oh wait, John, good at solving math problems. Wait a second, teacher, think aloud. If you're good at solving math problems, math can be hard. To do it, you have to be smart. Clever must mean smart, okay? So the context clues I used are good at solving math problems, and I know if you're good at solving math problems, you must be smart, so clever must mean smart, okay? I've done the teacher think aloud and modeling. The key to EDI is we ask our students to tell me, how did I solve it? How did I solve? How did I know the context clues good at solving math problems meant that clever is smart? I let them talk, think time, and then I let them answer. Remember, this checking for understanding, that's why we have it right here. How did I/you determine the meaning of the bolded words? The I is for the teacher. Tell me my teacher thinking, and then you, how did you do it independently? The key is, if a student can articulate how you did the problem, then they're going to be able to apply that information when they do their own problem. Okay, so Patty, how did I know the context clues good at solving math problems let me know clever meant smart?
Because the student is, they're saying that the student is good at solving
math problem. And would that mean that they're smart or would that mean that they're lazy?
Well, that obviously would mean that they're smart if they're good at it.
Yeah, because math problems take a lot of brain power to do, and that's why clever must mean smart. So now if you understand my thinking, now I'm hoping, and you can articulate it, now I'm hoping you can transfer it to your own thinking when I ask you to do it. Your turn, class. Let's look at this sentence. We have a bolded word, fluttered. Can you read that? Fluttered. All right, let's read it. The butterfly sat on a flower. Then it fluttered its wings and flew away. What does fluttered mean, and what are the context clues? Blah, blah, blah. I hope they show me B. They show me B, but they might have C. So this is where I do a reteach. I see a lot of students put C. This is what we do when we reteach an EDI. Don't you just go here. Let's look over here. I have a butterfly. Everyone be a butterfly on a flower. You have to fly away. If I have to fly away, I have to do this. I'm a butterfly. I have to do this to fly away. Let's see if I do this. Can't fly away. Which one? What do you think fluttered means? How do you know? That's the reteach. I did the first one. Students did the next one. Eventually, when I feel my students can do this successfully, I release them and I let them start doing it independently. And if you start navigating our lessons, they start to increase in the rigor and complexity of what we want them to do. We start getting into application. For example, skill closure, write a sentence for each picture using context clues. Now they're creating the highest level form of understanding in Bloom's taxonomy. You might model the first one. Okay, let me, this is what it means. This is a tiny little animal with a fuzzy tail. The tiny chipmunk is the word I don't know, wiggled his fuzzy tail and ran off. Can you visualize a chipmunk? Now try to write a sentence for cattails. We have independent practice eventually, and then eventually listen and speaking. Okay, sorry for racing there at the end. I think I just ran out of time, but I wanted to show you how the lessons progress. And Joel, do you want to finish this off right now?
Thank you so much, Joe. I know they covered a little bit before with a previous webinar, but your take on everything is always very original. And I know you have practical classroom experience. And let everyone go. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a good day.
Have a great day, everyone. Bye now.
Thank you so much.